everyone, welcome once again to Bat Chat. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Steve Baxter.
Today, Steve and I are going to be talking about a two-part episode. This is Robin's Reckoning, the origin of Robin, and this is one of Steve's very favorite episodes.
Yes, I love this one. I love it even more now that I've read Batman Year 3.
Yeah, and I'm excited to hear you bring some of that to the table, because I did not have the opportunity to read that before this, and I wanted to. Maybe we should review that. You know, that should probably be maybe the first comic we come back with when we take a break from this and we do comics again.
Oh yeah, definitely. That'd be a lot of fun, because it's better than every other Year 1 and Year 2 story out there.
Yes, let's do that. That's a really cool idea. So anyway, this has been one that Steve's been really excited about, and since the very beginning, and I think you've had people argue with you a little bit here and there about how good it is, so it'll be fun to talk about it, because, you know, when we've been talking about two-parters, like when we did Clayface, you're like, Clayface, I wish we were watching Robin's Reckoning. And I think it's also really funny that we just did Perchance to Dream a couple weeks ago. It's like a lot of our favorite episodes are really bunched up together.
Oh yeah, Volume 2 has got some of the best stuff. It's also got Almost Got Him coming up pretty soon.
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorites too. Yeah, a whole lot of the top 10s. And Robin's Reckoning might have made my top 10 if I had been, when I did the rewind, if I had been doing two-parters, which in retrospect I sort of wish I had, but it just felt kind of unfair, because it's like, well, you got more time to tell a story.
Yeah. So
most of the two-parters are really good, and of course back then I thought Clayface was better than I do now, but I still really like a lot of things about it. So anyway, Steve, going back and watching this again, this is really good. It was never one that I thought about as one of the great episodes of this. It always felt kind of obligatory, like, well, you have to do Robin's origin someplace. But watching it again with my knowledge now, and what I know about Batman and studying Batman for so long on this channel, because we could practically sometimes just call this the Batman channel. There's so much Batman. It is a really good episode.
Yeah, it's surprisingly good. The origin of Robin historically is not always the best story. Detective 38's pretty good, but every time we try to recapture that, we're always kind of inconsistent about it. Some of the best Robin stories are the ones where we're in early years and not necessarily retreading how we got there. And that's partly why this works and why Batman Year 3 works, because it's both a grown-up Robin and Robin's origin at the same time, so you have your cake and eat it too. The only time I've ever seen a solo Robin origin work outside of comics is the Batman episode, where they do his origin.
Yeah, and I've never seen that, but I always thought that was a really interesting way to spin things, where you start with Batgirl and you have Robin come after her.
Yeah, and you make them both about the same age, so you can have some more Woody banter, and it makes sense that Robin's really chatty.
I thought you said Woody banter. I've read Woody banter. I've read that. Well, anyway, we're going to go ahead and jump straight into it. As always, we're going to watch the episode and talk about it as we go. So if you'd like to watch it with us, grab your DVDs or go to Amazon. We're going to be watching it on Amazon. And Steve, you're going to be very happy about this. Both episodes, it's the right intro.
Nice. Awesome.
So anyway, go ahead and rig it up to timestamp 0 if you're going to watch it with us. Make sure to get past all the menus and everything. And if you want to listen to this someplace else while you're pruning your garden or working on your roof, you can listen to this as a podcast. We'll do our level best to provide some context as we go. And Steve and I are going to watch both parts, so we'll tell you when to rig up each of them as we go along. You ready to get started, Steve?
Yep, I'm all set.
All right, let's do it. Everybody, please press play right now.
This is exciting. I haven't watched this episode in a long time.
Steve's so excited, and he just can't hide it.
No, I can't hide it at all. It's pretty great. And we get the classic intro, too. This is you remember back when they made VHSs with 2 or 3 episodes apiece? It would be $10, $15, and it'd be ridiculous, but you'd buy them anyway. I did that with Robin's Reckoning. It was the first Batman VHS I ever owned, and it's to the point where I can hear the sounds and all of the images are crystal clear in my mind.
That's crazy, yeah. VHSs for singular episodes, or I guess rarely was it one episode. Usually it was a couple.
Yeah,
but you're right, it was always hilarious.
Riddler episodes or Two-Face episodes or something like that.
Yeah, but it was always the same price as a feature-length film.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, I'm a little older than you, Steve. We did that with the 87 Turtles series. We bought a couple of those, and yeah, they were really expensive.
Yeah, those are ridiculous. They did that all the way up until, the mid-2000s. They did with some DVDs early on, too, which was annoying.
Yeah, where they'd be that high. I mean, they still put those out, but I don't think they put them out at premium prices as much, right?
They don't release them as the first thing you ever get anymore. Like now it's like a few years down the line, here's a couple best of episodes, something like that.
Oh, that's not true. Like they've got some Power Rangers out right now from the new show.
Oh,
and I think they do, and I've seen it recently with a couple other things too, where it's like Ninja Turtles has been doing it. I mean, before they released their sets.
Oh, that's weird. I mean, I know sometimes they
show.
do like two-parters, so you buy 2 DVDs for a whole season, but not necessarily that.
So there's some good Woody banter here, Steve, and I really like that we open right away establishing Batman and Robin's dynamic and because they're the dynamic duo, so we have to establish their dynamic. But I like that Batman will smile around Robin in a way he won't around anybody else, besides Alfred maybe every now and again.
Yeah, Robin gives him a sense of enjoyment, a sense of bonding that makes the whole creature of the night thing a little bit less serious. And one of my all-time favorite things about Batman Year 3, where they explore some of this, is when Dick Grayson agrees to be Robin, he starts throwing around one-liners. And Alfred says, "Why do you do that? It makes you a moving target." And he says that the reason he likes making jokes is if I pretend to have fun fighting crime, maybe, just maybe, Bruce will too.
There might be, yeah, and what we see right away in this episode is, look, Robin is enjoying fighting crime, but it's not the sort of enjoyment of, like he doesn't empathize with the people that he's fighting at all to the point where he's brutalizing them. It's fun to hurt people. It isn't that. It's just that this kind of adventuring is thrilling, and so he has a good time with it, but it's still, I think tempered. And I watching this again made me wonder if maybe Batman, one of the things that keeps Batman from going too far over the line is Dick Grayson, and that he raised this kid that has a more optimistic view of the world and the way he looks at things. And I think that the episode does a good job of comparing both of them in their upbringing, but it's also really interesting that Bruce is the guy who brought up Robin, and I think that he again tempers him a little bit.
Yeah, no matter what Bruce does in the future, he raised a good kid, which is a massive victory for him. And it's something that makes, much later down the line, what was it called? Old Wounds, a lot more emotional when you see how disenfranchised those two are.
It's perhaps a good argument for why Batman needs a Robin. We ask that question all the time. Why does Batman need a silly teenage sidekick that wears bright colors and all of that? And you got to wonder if, especially the way this show plays it, which I really like, where he doesn't become Robin at 10 years old. He's been Batman raised him, and for quite a while before he even knew he was Batman. I really appreciate that. That maybe that tempering was already happening. That Batman could have got a lot darker, and maybe even gone over the edge and started brutalizing and even killing criminals, if not for Dick Grayson.
Yeah, he had someone to come home to in a way he hadn't ever before, which is really interesting. Because Bruce is never, no matter how many years of Batman you read, it's really tough to find a good story where Bruce is actually acting like a father. And this episode really subtly highlights some of that, that these two guys have a relationship. And it's very much built on Robin looks up to him, but he fixes all the mistakes Bruce has made growing up.
Now, looking back at this scene just for a minute, Steve, I feel like things would have played much differently if they had accidentally killed this guy. Like this is one of those situations where, because it's a cartoon, and because it's Batman and Robin and they're very skilled, you might not even think about it. But I mean, like, what they just did with that guy is really dangerous. Like, really, and this is where you get in a place where you can kind of see the script a little bit, where it's like, okay, we've decided that no matter what happens, they're gonna save this guy, and what if they accidentally dropped it? It would have been a very different story. And luckily, because you get the sense that they've done this before. Like, this is the way these guys together operate when they're interrogating people. And what if one of them accidentally died?
Yeah, and if you want an example of that, just ask Gwen Stacy. It's not that easy to save a guy like that. Now that we're out of the scene, though, I do want to quickly mention that at the end of Detective 38, when we get Robin's origin, back in 1940. The whole final confrontation takes place in a construction building. So the fact that we opened the episode with that's kind of a cool reference.
You know, when you shoot it from that angle, it looks like it's animation. When you have that angle and the Batmobile drives into its space, it looks like it's on teeth that are eating it.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. If I remember correctly, the first part of this episode won an Emmy, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I guess deservingly so. Like I said, I didn't remember this being a great episode, and it really is. I found myself doing something I've never really done watching this episode, which is thinking about the difference between Alfred as a father figure and Batman as a father figure.
Yeah.
Because while Bruce did have Alfred couldn't have really understood him. He did his best. He raised him as best he could. But Bruce Wayne, and I feel like this is one of those things that Gotham is kind of more or less getting right and doing sort of interesting things with. Yes, I just complimented Gotham. that Alfred is kind of allowing Bruce Wayne to raise himself. And what Robin has that Batman didn't is Batman. You know, if only you had the cycle where somebody like Batman had raised Bruce Wayne, he would have come out potentially, maybe, a little bit more like Robin. Although, I think that there is a big difference also in upbringing, being raised in the circus versus being raised in this in this cold, kind of isolated house, and in this world of wealth. So you do have those backgrounds informing them. But what if somebody like Batman had raised Batman?
Yeah,
instead of
as a kid that is like 9 years old needed Zorro. He needed Robin Hood, and that's what his kid turned into. That's the biggest compliment you could ever give Dick Grayson, which is really interesting because Alfred, he's a military guy and he's an actor. Those are his two big things, and sometimes a private detective, depending on what you're reading. So no matter what you do with that, Alfred's always going to teach him to put on some kind of face. And Bruce, as
that's a good point,
kind of needed that, didn't see what genuine human connection is outside of that face. But it's interesting that he's able to see it in other things like Zorro or Robin Hood, depending on what his origin takes place during, and then he gives that to another kid. That he's able to inspire. That's the mentality that got him partially way through his parents' death.
Yeah, and after you said that, I thought of this. Compare the costumes. Batman is trying to look like something that's not human. You can only see a small part of his face. He doesn't look like a human being. And the only reason Robin wears a costume at all is to honor his parents, but also, and comparing that is interesting,
yeah.
But also, he wears a small, thin domino mask just to protect his identity. He's not trying to scare anyone. He's just being a superhero.
Yeah, Robin's a lot like Captain America in that way. Batman is this strong, brooding, big picture, look at the darkest and best spots of humanity, nothing in the middle. Robin's just a kid that doesn't like bullies. And so he's got a much more natural affinity with some of the ways he's able to deal with criminals and put on his costume and still enjoy being who he is. And Batman tries to cover that up as much as possible, and Robin's able to bring it out of him a little bit. And it helps that visually they both got that dynamic. Tim Sale talks about how the biggest reason he agreed to do Dark Victory is because visually crossing Batman and Robin together is fascinating.
Well, and even the difference in how their parents were murdered. I mean, Bruce Wayne understands Dick Grayson in a way nobody else could, and yet they're still very different people and look at the world very differently. Bruce Wayne, and this is probably partly where the obsession comes from versus simply doing this because it's a good idea. Remember that Robin, in many stories, is able to leave this life and come back to it. Like, multiple, he can go back and forth. Batman can't do that. He forces himself in a perpetual obsession. Why is that? I think partially because Batman, because, by the way, I like that he does this on purpose, dropping just drinking his popcorn. Yeah, right? I like the absent-minded thing. I like that, this idea that Bruce Wayne was his parents, his world was taken away from him through a random act of violence, completely random, didn't make sense to him, came out of nowhere. The same is not true, especially with the way it's played here, with how Dick Grayson's parents were killed. He saw it coming. There's a difference.
Yeah, and it's almost always that way. Every time we do Dick Grayson's origin, it's always Dick runs into Zuko somewhere, and that's especially interesting when you contrast like post-crisis Batman, where he has absolutely no idea, and we retcon Joe Chill. That the biggest thing Dick Grayson was able to get from Bruce Wayne is that he got some sense of peace from knowing they caught the guy. And it brings up the interesting question of, if they never caught Tony Zuko, would he have turned out differently?
Tony Zuko in this is voiced by Tom Wilson, who, of course, played Biff Tannen in the Back to the Future movies, and it's the absolute best possible choice.
Oh, yeah.
Because, and he's just doing the same voice. He's not modulating it at all. He's just doing Biff Tannen. He squeaks in the same kinds of places. He looks deranged. They've drawn him to look like Biff Tannen to a degree so that, especially when you get to the end of the second part, where he's just got this crazy expression on his face all the time. He's like, ah! And it's hilarious. But it's also a perfect choice because, again, he's a bully. He's in some ways the same kind of bully.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. He's really small time, but he thinks he's extremely intimidating. And he's got the same kind of inferiority complex that you get in part 2 when he's terrified of Batman. And it almost makes me think, if you ever made a live action Batman Robin movie back in the 70s or 80s, he would have been perfect casting choice even then.
Wouldn't you have loved to have seen him play it? Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of strokes of genius in casting choices in these, and that's one that I don't hear people talk about very much. That's a stroke of genius. And Tony Zuko's not a character people talk about. He's thought of as kind of a placeholder. He's just, you need something to get Dick Grayson's parents killed. We don't talk about him like a character a lot. And I think that, I'm sure you do, but your average person probably doesn't think about Tony Zuko at all. And you're right that again, the bully versus the faceless random killer.
Yeah. Because there's an implied aspect of conditioning in the bully that people sometimes make dumb choices, or you can talk to them, or something else is influencing this. And Batman doesn't have that same kind of optimistic outlook when he's dealing with random acts of violence the way Dick does here.
And I think that works even if Bruce Wayne's killer has a face, just because, again, one is random and one is calculated. One is played as with Tony Zuko. These, or at least the circus deserves it. I did this because this is the consequences of somebody's actions versus, again, the random act of violence. But thinking about the fact that Joe Chill is there in the Nolan movies. Makes me wonder if that was a calculated choice there, because if you give him a face, it makes a little bit more sense maybe in doing a more grounded Batman that at some point can stop being Batman. It doesn't have the obsessive, godlike thing that this version does and a lot of the comic versions do. I'd never thought about that before.
Yeah, although, and Nolan is able to play it both ways, because Joe Chill is still a nobody. It's not like he's part of a bigger scheme that allows the Waynes to die, like in Gotham.
Yeah, and they do play it in that really interesting way of, is it justice or is it vengeance? Because he gets to see him get justice, kind of, except he's murdered, not put in jail or given the chair or anything.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's all really interesting. This stuff is really important. The fact that Bruce Wayne is actually a father figure for Dick, and this is a thing. I wish I saw this in more screen versions. I like Batman Forever a lot, but it has to truncate this stuff so much that you don't. That they talk more about the partner dynamic than the father-son dynamic, and that's kind of unfortunate because it's more heartwarming here. It makes Bruce Wayne humanized but not too humanized. I like this version of it a lot more than something like that.
Yeah, it's probably the best on screen. I'm trying to think of another version, but I don't really remember any off the top of my head. It's probably the best version of this because There's lots of important directing choices and art style choices when we get to young Dick Grayson. You look at the size of that table and how dark and dank everything is. The way the light hits Dick Grayson as opposed to the way it hits Bruce Wayne. That Bruce is almost always seen like standing up and Dick's almost always seen sitting down. And there's some really interesting directing choices there that make it work even if you don't necessarily have a bunch of scenes like that. We got away from it a little while ago, but I wanted to quickly mention that at the Goodbye at the Circus that we just had, Bruce Timm talks about how that scene always makes him cry. Because it is pretty sad that this kid does sort of have a home, but he has to leave it in the worst point in his life possible. And then the death of Dick's parents, they obviously weren't allowed to show two bodies hitting the floor. And Bruce Timm was really annoyed about the fact that they couldn't do that. But he's gone back and said that he's thankful that the network was so censorship heavy because just the image of the rope dangling is pretty tragic enough.
Yeah, those limitations, because they were creative about it and they didn't let it mess with the spirit of what they wanted to do. It kind of worked like minimalism works.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of the same as a budget. It makes you be creative about those things, and it forced them into subtlety.
Yeah, it did. And there's lots of instances throughout the series where they're able to get away with stuff like that. An image is always a lot more provocative than just explicitly showing us everything.
Yes, because it forces you to use your imagination, and you're thinking about and it's about putting what's important in focus. So it's about so we're making it about what it's about, and not about the gratuitousness or the shockingness of the shock factor of the image itself. It's about what it means, about the implications of it. I'm gonna go back to Gotham again. How much better would Gotham be if it was forced into some of those restrictions?
Oh yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. It's able to get away with far too much sometimes.
Yeah, and I mean, I get that's a very, very different thing, and I get that it wants to be black comedy and it wants to do all that stuff. But if we could force them to rein it in, some of that would be more effective. A little more. I'm not saying this kind of thing has to be the most subtle, high art thing in the world. I'm not saying that. But a little subtlety goes a long way. And this stuff is not insulting our intelligence.
No, it's not. It's perfect for if you're a kid, and it's perfect 20, 30 years later. It really holds up well, and you could still show it to people that have never watched a Batman thing before, and they can appreciate it as just another story. They don't have to worry about it being a cartoon.
Yeah, it's timeless. Yeah, definitely. And for whatever reason, this is an episode that I feel is more timeless than some other ones. Like, if I had to make a list of those, this would be up there. And I think part of it is because of kind of the some of the old-fashioned stuff that it simply just owns and uses, regardless of the fact that even in 93, 94, the circus, not as big of a deal as it used to be. You don't see as much of that anymore. And so we just take elements and make it look like vaguely early 20th century, and you can get away with all that kind of stuff without having to think about how it's not realistic anymore.
Yeah, and they do a lot with Batman to both be in line with like Golden Age, Silver Age campiness, and then what we're used to with modern. Like some of this action we see, the way the cape moves, it's the best in the series. They get some of the most iconic shots off of Batman and some of the best lighting choices with that character in this episode, and they never have to be too childish about it. They never have to be too obvious about it. They never have to like forcefully give you a look at how cool this panel moment is or anything like that. They're able to grow that character and give us lots of consistent scenes with him that aren't necessarily for one audience over another.
I remember, I really like the way, by the way, this scene, the shadows are done in the scene to evoke loneliness, and now Bruce Wayne walks in and he's going to help create less of that loneliness. I was gonna say something, Steve, and I'm trying to remember what it was. It was important. Well, I'll think of it.
But no, I like the sequel.
Oh, I know what it was. I'm sorry. I really like the choice to go back to the bat symbol without the circle and having the belt with the pockets on it, because that denotes. I mean, obviously the aesthetic changes, but part of it is just passage of time. The new belt seems more futuristic. But I always thought that was a kind of a cool nod to Golden and Silver Age, and it really irked me even as a kid when they went to season 4 and they took the circle off of it again, just because every time we went back in Batman's past, we used that design, and then for whatever reason, he just decides to embrace that old design again. I don't know why. I mean, it would be like if Captain Kirk was suddenly flying around in the Constitution Enterprise when they had updated it. They'd refitted it. It's really strange.
I like it a little bit more than you do, because at that point, Robin has left him. They left on some pretty awful terms, so Batman would naturally kind of regress a little bit. So you go to the full black costume, and then we explain that later when we get to Old Wounds. The other quick thing I want to mention just aesthetically is when we saw Bruce Wayne in the past, he looks a lot like David Mazzucchelli Batman.
Oh, okay.
From year 1, which is pretty cool.
So we'll go to the second part here in a second. Something I meant to bring up earlier is that this episode is structured really similarly to the way Mask of the Phantasm is structured.
Yeah. There's a scene earlier that I think we talked over where Batman's on top of a car that's almost page for page the way they did in Mask of the Phantasm. Or storyboard for storyboard. Yeah.
But also, obviously, I'm mostly saying that in the sense that you have two subplots that are taking place with some of the same characters in different times, and it's not just flashbacks to inform the present. There is a story being told in the past, just like there was in Mask of the Phantasm, and then eventually they converge and they become the same story.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about some of the stuff that got cut from part 2 when we move forward.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that anything was. Okay. All right, so we're going to go on to the second part now, and Steve, just let me know when you're rigged up for it.
I'm all set.
Okay, so going on to the second part now of Robin's Reckoning, and obviously you might not be able to rig yours up as fast as ours, but luckily you have the power of the pause button. And now we're going to get right into it. Everybody, please press play right now.
I love that we get to continue with that intro. It's just perfect. It really brings me back to like when I was 7, 8 years old watching those episodes.
When you have these, you just take it for granted. When I watch these two, and this is neither here nor there. When I watch these two-parters, I have a hard time making myself with the second part sit through the intro again and the last time on Batman thing. I want to go right through. I think it would have been really cool if there was a box set that put them together as a 45-minute episode.
That'd be really cool. I know that at one point you could. There was a fan that did that for all the two-parters. You could just download them as like 40-minute episodes, which is cool.
That's fun, yeah. And I mean, there are TV episodes that play better even if they are a two-parter as two separate. Clear, these are separate episodes. Most of the Batman episodes, they just needed another. 22 minutes to really flesh out the story they're telling. And isn't it really interesting that the same house, years later, working on the direct-to-video DVDs with Dark Knight Returns, thought of that in movie form. I mean, that had to have been the mentality. It had to have been, we used to do this when we didn't have enough space, and it's the only way we could possibly afford to make this into a movie. Why don't we do the same thing we did with this show, but do it in 2 movies?
Yeah, and it was one of the last Bruce Timm-led projects, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it had to have come from that line of thinking.
Oh yeah, definitely. I hope they do more of that if they're going to choose to adapt stories, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah. Depending on what they adapt, but picking things like Killing Joke, that's a thing you can tell in 80 minutes. That's a thing you could almost probably tell in more like 45 minutes.
Yeah, it doesn't take very long. Depends on how much you linger on certain shots, really.
Yeah, so I mean that's exciting that they're picking some material like that is shorter and that seems to warrant that format a little bit. Format as in just the time, the length of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the second part originally was supposed to have more flashbacks with Dick Grayson wearing the Robin costume for the first time. and going
really?
on some of the first adventures with him with Bruce. What exactly they were going to do with Dick as a kid as Robin was never really made clear, because they cut it really early on because it was running way too long, which makes sense. You almost could have turned this two-parter into like a 70-minute movie if you did that.
Yeah.
But I
there's a part
wish
of
we
me
had
that
some of at least in script form, just to see what their ideas were.
What it was. I'll tell you, man, I wish they had released this like they did Mask of the Phantasm. I think that if they had fleshed it out like that, and done it like, first of all, they could have been companion pieces. I mean, these are somewhat comparable stories.
Yeah.
You've got Robin, you know, because then you put in Robin's first year, you got Batman's first year, and I mean, obviously, they're different, you know, they're very different stories, but like you know, Batman's not like, you know, meeting his maker like Robin is, but that, I don't know, that would have been really cool. And this episode might have gotten, I mean, I think it probably is well loved, but it might have even gotten more admiration had it been done that way, because like I said, I didn't remember this being nearly as excellent as it is. If only it had gotten the Mask of the Phantasm treatment.
Yeah, no, that would have been great, especially considering that the animated movies we get with Batman outside of Mask of the Phantasm just weren't that good at that point.
And considering that Dick Grayson has some things to do in Sub-Zero, and I know there's a lot of folks that don't like it when I say this, but I just don't like that movie very much, and I don't think a lot of stuff about it doesn't work. And too bad
It's beautifully animated. That's about it, really.
It looks gorgeous, but it's subpar story-wise, and it's got a lot of really weird, you know, plot holes, for lack of a better. There's just things that don't make sense. But man, like imagine if we'd done that, and then go all the way. Have your Batgirl origin also be in a you know, feature-length film.
Yeah.
Why not?
Two-parter with her later down the line.
I know, yeah. And if we'd fleshed that out, we could have made. And now it's not to the same level as this in Mask of the Phantasm, but it's good. I mean,
I enjoy it.
It's good.
Yeah. I almost wish that they were able to do some more of that. I'm not sure what the constraints were, where they were only able to make a couple movies, but I really wish back in their prime they could have done some more of this stuff. Tim Sale and Jeff Loeb talk about how some of the major two-parters in this series inspired a lot of their comics. Dark Victory in particular taking a lot of influence from this episode, even though it's nowhere near as good.
I took the time there during the fencing scene to dog on Sub-Zero again. So I want to talk about that for a second. I think the fencing scene is really important. I think the fact that they had a relationship that went as far, and this could have been really kooky and really hokey, and it doesn't play that way. And mirrors in a way, in a different kind of way. Because I'm not trying to be gross or weird when I say this. It mirrors a little bit that scene in Mask of the Phantasm early on with Bruce and Andrea when they're like wrestling around on the ground. It kind of mirrors that, and I like that they had that kind of relationship. Again, it is very father-son. I like that he got Bruce out of his shell. And again, not to be a broken record, but I just feel like Batman might have been a lot darker without him.
Yeah, Batman in that scene's all about structure, and then Dick just shows up and he's having fun with it, and he's improvising, and he's making the fight a little bit of a joke, and that's exactly what that character needed at that point.
Yeah. Well, and once again, look at the aesthetics of their backgrounds. Bruce was growing up in the shadows, even not realizing it before anything happened to his parents. Look at that house. Look at how foreboding it is. Look at all the shadows. Those seemingly small things about our upbringings are really important, and his parents probably didn't even think about it. It's just how it's just the house they own. It's where the Waynes came from.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Bruce Wayne's family has got such a strong rooted foundation in Gotham City, in that one particular house, and Dick Grayson's entire life was on the road in the circus.
Moving around, yeah. And so then you can look at those backgrounds to inform the fact that he's an acrobat and he's jumping around and he has a good time with that. And Batman's a little bit more I don't want to say lumbering, but I mean like he doesn't do that. He can when the time arises, when it calls for it, but he lives in the shadows. He's part of that city. And yeah, how grounded is he? How much of Batman staying in Gotham City and trying to save Gotham City has to do with simply, for him, it's the whole world.
Yeah.
Always has been.
Yeah, and Dick Grayson being a kid that's just was raised to move on. and he just happened to get the right person to move that forward.
And so then doesn't Bloodhaven make so much more sense?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I'm not crazy about the whole Grayson spy thing, but that's also like a pretty good extension of that. That he was kind of a global force before he got contained anywhere. Which Batman does that from time to time, and I really like when they do that with that character. But it's definitely not the way this series thought of him.
I think the global spy thing, if it had come from a different place, would work better if it was his if it was like another alter ego, like if he was a spy and Nightwing, that could be really cool.
Yeah, that would be whole.
And then he'd be like Peter Parker, where you're just like, how do you have your thumbs in that many pies? Like, how do you manage to do that? He's, it's like Spider-Man as an Avenger. You're with Spiral, and you're by yourself, and and then he ends up owning his own like restaurant. Speaking of restaurants, why does it have a crossword puzzle on the outside?
That's a good question. We talked over it a little bit earlier, but when Dick Grayson first gets off the train and the guy asks him, "Is that your old man or something?" and Dick just responds with "or something." Right from that point, this whole second part has got a much heavier noir feel than the rest of the episode.
That's a great point. Yeah, well, even with this diner, I'd say.
Yeah, with the diner, with this woman he's with, the whole classic femme fatale style of it, the whole episode at this point just becomes noir, which is really great. And
you've always got to have your...
when we get the Akira reference.
Yeah, good call. You've always got to have, in a diner like that, if you're trying to make it look noirish, you always got to have the black and white checkerboard.
Yeah, and then, of course, the classic trope of truth and darkness, and that the day gets darker as he keeps going forward. Because,
of course, everything in a noir piece is like a chess match. It's always people making moves and countering moves, and Spawn overused that like crazy.
This might seem insignificant, but Bruce Wayne, along with most characters in this series, have black eyes, and Dick Grayson's the only character we see definitively with a different eye color.
It's fascinating that you ever even noticed that. That's not yours, is it? Somebody told you that.
No, I just noticed it on this viewing because there's
that's awesome.
There's so much focus on Dick Grayson through the eyes, which I guess I wouldn't have made sense of earlier or later. But we just saw get that shot a little bit earlier where he's like peeking through the wood, and you just see these big blue eyes, and he's just instantly more innocent, and he's instantly more colorful than any other character in the series.
Dick Grayson, I thought I told you never to come in here.
This is a great shot, too.
Why don't you make like a tree and get out of here?
At this point, it's kind of tough to talk. I just kind of want to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, I just, I'm hearing that voice and I'm looking at that character, and I feel like you could probably write a whole paper about the things that he and Biff Tannen have in common and why they went for that voice. They basically just wrote that character in this episode. Yeah. Totally works. Without the chauvinist womanizing thing, just because there's not any women in this episode.
Yeah, no, they're not. And Tony Zuko's always kind of like a minor character anyway. So it makes sense not to give him too much like that.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, you're not going to give him too much. Hey, Steve's like, no, don't write that paper. No one cares. Oh, I'm sorry. Come to think of it, there was one woman, but she's not all that important.
No, not really. Kind of an exposition piece for another thing, really.
Yeah, but looks like somebody's hench girl.
She does. She totally has that look.
I don't know. Hench girls in this show always wear bright red blouses. You ever notice them?
Yeah. That girl from the Two-Face two-parter.
Yeah, she had that. And they always have, like, way too much eyeshadow, and then they have, like, usually really bright red lipstick.
Yeah, Red Claw had that too, I think.
Yeah, well, of course Red Claw had that, but yeah. I think we saw it happen earlier. I thought the Batwing flying over with the searchlight thing was a really interesting choice. Because everybody, like, turns off their lights in that neighborhood and, like, goes in the house and stuff, almost as if they're not surprised by it and they've seen this kind of thing happen before. Like, how much of Batman is urban legend and how much of him is simply nobody talks about him but everybody knows he's there? And I mean, like, it's almost like Batman's created... This is going too far. It's almost like he's created a police state that nobody talks about. He is the man in charge.
Maybe so. And The Dark Knight plays with that idea a little bit now that I'm thinking about it. when we get that opening montage and some of the characters say they don't want to go out just because the bat signal's up.
Yeah.
I really like this reveal, too, where Bruce takes off the mask and he's smiling. Like, how perfect is that?
Yeah, that's cool. And contrast that to, I keep bringing up Mask of the Phantasm, and I didn't even mean to this time. Contrast that with the first time Alfred sees him take his mask off.
Yeah.
This should have been a movie!
It really should have. The more you're saying this, I might eventually just do something where I compare both those movies and write it down.
It should have been, it's not, but it should have been a sequel to Phantasm.
Yeah, I totally
That's what it should be. Now, I don't remember if Phantasm came out before this, but I thought it came out between 1 and 2.
I think so. Well, was that 92?
Yeah, and 92 was Batman Returns, which I think is part of the reason they decided to put it in the theater at last minute, because remember, it was supposed to be direct to video.
Right. And this episode was 93, so yeah, they easily could have been a movie.
But yeah.
Well, the Mask of the Phantasm didn't do really well initially, so I guess maybe that's why they weren't able to.
But they still put out other things straight to video. I mean, like,
That's
remember
true.
that Mask of the Phantasm was... Yeah, Mask of the Phantasm did fine for video sales. It just didn't have a good box office because nobody knew about it. They rushed it out too fast and they didn't do any advertising for it. Imagine if that had been the plan all along. I mean, really, like, a Batman movie, an animated Batman movie right after Batman Returns. It wasn't that nobody was interested. It was that nobody knew about it. I didn't see it in the theater, and I would have.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Nobody knew about it, that's all.
Yeah, and just comparing this to Sub-Zero, I really wish this got the movie, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, there's actually a story here.
Yeah, because Sub-Zero could have been a 22-minute mediocre episode, I think. I mean, like, I felt like that movie had to stretch to be movie length. Again, you can disagree with me if you want to. It's just how I feel about it. I don't like that movie very much.
Yeah. There are certain scenes like fighting the polar bears and the car chase that are fun to watch, but that's about it.
Oh yeah, it's got its moments, but it's mostly action stuff. Is what I would praise that movie for.
Yeah. And
imagine that treatment with the depth of field and the soft focus and stuff. Given this episode, now I mean I really like the animation we have here, but like just imagine that.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I mean, this episode does some great animation stuff already, but what if it got a budget? And I love Tony Zuko's face here, how absolutely scared out of his mind he is.
I may not get a chance to mention it later, so I'll say it here. When we get to the, Mama. That's hilarious. When we get to the final climax, there's a horse on a carousel that has exactly his facial expression, and they jump to it like 3 times. It's just like, and I feel like they're intentionally paralleling it.
I'm not sure what the symbolism of that would be off the top of my head, but
I don't know, Tony Zuko is a horse on a carousel. I don't even know what that metaphor means, but
is he?
No!
That thinks he's in motion, maybe, I don't know. You'd really have to stretch to make that work.
Because then one of the other
hurting
horses
his leg and not being able to take these guys out is a little bit hokey for me.
Is he going around in circles because he keeps doing the same things to people, and then like at some point. But then the horse would almost have to like get taken off the carousel and hauled away. Like,
yeah, the park would have to be condemned or something.
I think this is a good choice for location here at the end, Steve, at the carnival. It invokes the circus, but it's not on the nose.
Yeah.
And it symbolizes loss of childhood.
Yeah, it's turning off the lights on that kind of perspective. And that's perfect for when Robin shows up and saves the day, basically.
Oh no, don't shoot Timbleton the rat! Life is a veritable smorgasbord, smorgasbord.
Some of the motorcycle stuff in this is just really good. And we'll get to it a little bit later when we get the Akira reference. But that's a really great shot.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the shots they use in the opening when they change the title to The Adventures of Batman and Robin.
Yeah, most of the footage comes from these 2 episodes for that intro.
Of course. Because it has a lot of Robin in it. I mean, the thing is, this is, in this series, I want to say, pretty much the only, like, really Robin-centered episode. He's usually kind of just there the rest of the time we use him, right?
Yeah, he's not always necessary. He's always just either, hey, by the way, you're conveniently located next to me or something like that. It's never
or
a heavy story.
Or you put him in peril so that Batman has somebody to save.
Yeah.
Because you've got that Riddler sequel where they do that.
Yeah, you're right. There's just not a lot of good Robin-heavy episodes throughout most of the series' run.
But then there's a part of me that likes that, because why would you try to top this? It's just so good.
No,
I mean, Robin
if
fans...
you're going to have Robin, you might as well put him in a story where Batman can use him strategically.
Oh, no, absolutely, yeah. And where he's not just there so they can argue about whether or not he's ready for whatever it is there. Like this is the best episode for that. For that whole argument of, Robin, you're not ready, you can't come with me, I'm gonna do this alone. Sometimes it's just generically, that's that horse! Sometimes it's just, he's got that Biff Tannen facial expression. See, look, that's the facial, see, it's the same thing, and you're gonna see that horse again. But that's, but a lot of the time it's just Batman generically going, I have to do this alone. I'm a loner. I'm Batman. And in this, I really liked it. It feels like that for a minute, and then we find out that it's because he's trying to protect him. And I really like Batman's explanation at the end of this, that it's not that he's afraid Robin will go too far. It's that he doesn't want to lose him, and more than that, he doesn't want to lose him to the thing that killed his parents. Probably partly because he's imagining what that would be like for him.
Yeah. That stuff's absolutely fascinating, and Dick's anger is really justifiable when you get to the end of this. And it puts a point on some of the stuff we said earlier. There's that Akira shot. It's fantastic. It puts a point on what we said a little bit earlier about Dick Grayson being raised as well as he did, as well as he is, considering Batman's his dad.
Can you believe how realistic we're going with this? Where Batman's got a splint, and at the end of this, he's like limping and can he exacerbates the wound. We don't even talk about it. He's fighting a guy with it. We see him kick with that leg. He's limping at the end. That is fantastic.
Yeah, it's handled really, really well. It's a little bit odd to me that Batman would just hurt his leg and then not immediately be able to take out some of those guys, because we've seen him do worse than that before.
Well, that's because I think that we've got more. I think it's also because we've got more grit to this episode. I mean, like I think we're consciously trying to make this more realistic, and I think that it's an appropriate look at how he's limping. I think that's appropriate. Since this isn't a very heightened kind of episode, it's stylistic, but our threat is a thug.
Yeah.
And we're talking about mortality, and we're talking about loss of innocence and that kind of stuff. Make these characters as brittle as real people.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It definitely works perfectly thematically. And then it just adds a lot of layers to the emotion when Dick says, "You and your stone cold heart." And the way we capitalize some of that Batman tries to put on
that's
a lot
little Yeah, that's a little melodramatic for me, but I appreciate the point of it. I meant to say I meant to say this because I thought of this while I was watching it earlier. Robin's coming after Zuko, and I just want him to go, "Nobody calls my cape yellow."
It's also perfect that the episode ends when the sun rises.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
The whole... I guess,
should have. That's what we're left with. Yeah.
The whole episode, both parts, were really, in some places, a little bit melodramatic, like you said. But again, it just kind of fits with the way we're telling the story. It's a noir. It has to embellish every now and then. And plus, it's superheroes. You don't want everything to be ridiculously subtle.
No, because then it would be tea drinking and stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you don't want that. Man, that's a good episode. You were absolutely right about that episode, Steve. When you said that early on, I was perplexed. I was like, why is Steve ranking that? And it's like, it's just Robin's origin. We all know the origin. We all know it from this, and this is where we should be getting it for the first time.
Yeah, this is one of the best versions of that story. It's still one of my favorite episodes. It's up there with Perchance to Dream and Old Wounds.
Well, once again, probably my favorite thing about it, this might seem minor for some people, is just that Bruce Wayne is raising Dick for a long time. We didn't get to talk about this as much as I wanted to before he becomes Robin. I really like that he doesn't happen upon the Batcave. How cool! Like it's so, just from a story structure place. There's not a lot of coincidence. There's not a lot of convenience. It's totally believable that you know, Batman's following him because Batman is Bruce Wayne, and then he, as Batman, takes him to the Batcave and he has no idea where he is. And I love that. I also think that moment where he reveals that he's Bruce Wayne, and then Alfred says, "Well, I guess you'll be staying then." And he's got this. It's like Dick doesn't even get the implications of that. He's just got this "Yay, I'm even more part of the family than I was before" facial expression. And the first place my mind went was, no. They're saying that if you left, they would have to kill you. Because you know the secret of Batman now. Like Alfred is kind of nudging him like, you can't leave now because you know the scene.
And Alfred makes a lot of those jokes throughout the series.
That scene is awkward, and I love that Dick is not even remotely aware of it. He's such a child in that scene. And you would be too. Holy crap, the Batcave.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. He's like 9 or 10 years old in this episode, so of course he has that reaction.
And isn't it really cool? I mean, that's so indicative of who he is, and all of the upbringing and background that we talked about, that when he sees the Batcave, when he finds out just how dark and brooding Bruce Wayne is, the first place his mind goes, he's a little kid in a candy store. That's so cool.
Yeah, it again just further exemplifies that he's a lot more optimistic than Bruce ever was. And then some of that comes from the fact that Bruce helped him through what he was going through, and some of it comes back from his parents and the place that he was raised, and he's just kind of accustomed to moving on. The kid's got so many interesting layers. You could write a psychology paper on him.
Absolutely, and I'm sure you will at some point.
Maybe. It won't be 42 pages, but...
Okay, so I just now thought of this. The what is the name of the episode with the guy that everybody thinks killed Batman?
Trying to think off that.
Because that's this season.
Is that this season?
I think that's this season. Yeah, it's the man who killed Batman.
Oh, okay.
I basically just said it, but didn't realize that was the episode title. I'm going to say that this episode, regardless of production order, had to have happened. See, this is weird and makes no sense. Either somehow during or after that episode.
Maybe so.
Because the name Sid the Squid is mentioned.
Yeah, there might have been like a loose cannon there, or maybe just immediately the ideas came to mind.
Yeah, because we gotta be talking about two different guys ultimately, right? Because that guy's in jail, like he's got this list of people, and he wouldn't have been called that until after he killed Batman. But then he's not operating after that. So when does this episode take place if it's the same person? So it can't be the same person.
That's a good question. I don't remember how late into the season that particular episode is. I think we're a ways off from it.
We are. Production-wise, it's not listed until 23.
Okay.
So it's quite a ways off, but and these are supposed to be in production order, but the reason I thought of it is because Amazon's got it as the next episode, so...
Oh, does it? That's weird.
Yeah, so it's weird.
As Laughing Fish is the next episode.
Well, okay, so it's got a little box that says next up, and I just assumed that would be the next episode, so maybe it's randomizing them?
Maybe. There might be like a shuffle function on there somewhere.
It shouldn't be doing that. Oh no, it is Laughing Fish. Okay, that's just a screenshot from what I thought was that episode, but it is from Laughing Fish. Okay.
Ah, well. Okay.
All right. I thought that screenshot was Sid the Squid, but it's not. Really similar looking design of that character, and with Harley Quinn, who was in that episode.
Yeah, they do both look pretty similar. I wouldn't be surprised if they recycled that body model for that character.
All right, so Laughing Fish is next, and we're going to do that for you next week. Everybody, thanks as always for watching. Steve, I really enjoyed this. This is some of the most fun I've had doing a commentary. There's so much to talk about. Yeah,
I'm glad you enjoyed it as much as you did. This is still one of my favorite episodes. I love watching it.
Well, everybody, thanks again for watching. We sure appreciate it. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Steve Baxi.
We'll see you next time.